Welcome, Dr. Tomori. It is really my honor. It's a second time to introduce you here at UTMB. Dr. Tomori received his DVM degree from Ahmadu Bello University and PhD in virology from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. The same year, he also received award from United States Department of Health and Human Service, Public Health Services. In 1984, he moved to University of Ibadan and has performed research focused on viral infections, mostly initially arboviruses, as I could hear today, and then also including Ebola and other hemorrhagic fever viruses such as yellow fever virus and Lassa. Dr. Tomori has a lot of international awards. He served on many international committees, including WHO for decades now, and one of the probably stellar awards will be the Fellow of the American Society of Tropical Medicine of Hygiene, as well as the member of Academy here in the US. Dr. Tomori, please come up. He's going to talk to you today about the viruses and other pathogens in Nigeria. And I just want to make a personal note at the end that a few years ago when I ran into some technical problems for some final negotiations with NIH for my project in Nigeria, Dr. Tomori picked up the phone and solved pretty much all the issues. So thank you one more time and welcome here at UTMB.
Howdy. Oh, sorry, I thought I was still in Texas. I got into College Station dressed like this on Monday morning. And by the end of the conference on Monday, the temperature had moved from whatever to -4. And coming from 32 degrees centigrade, you can imagine what I went through, I already had my Siberia coat, because I knew I'm going to Baltimore. But I didn't bring it in because, this was like home. Oops. I knew it was going to be, when I said like home and the power failed, which is just like home, because we have power failure almost all the time. I don't know, somebody watching knows I'm here Anyway, so I'm glad to be here. It's good to be here always, because you have wonderful people, great people that I've met with, many years, and they are still remaining great. It's a wonderful thing to be good when you are young, to be better as you grow older, to be best before you die. This is one of the great things that happen. So I'm always happy to be back here. Today I wanted to talk about viruses in Nigeria. And I said from colonial to Neo-Colonial Times. Because a lot of the viruses that we're dealing with today that are becoming great problems in the world, many of them originated from Africa. And without the Rockefeller Foundation that set up those labs in Uganda and Nigeria and other parts of the world, we probably won't have the knowledge we have about those viruses today. And so this is more like a tribute to all the great people who were in those days of Rockefeller. I've got a little of them, Graham Kemp, Tom Monat, the Corsies, the Careys, they came to Nigeria at that time and began the study of viruses. It wasn't that they were the first external people to come. We were under the British colonial rule from 1860 to 1960, 100 years of colonial rule. We're still under colonial rule. Anyway, so these people came first before the Rockefeller came in. But their focus was actually more on protecting the colonial officers. These are the CEOs, we used to call them then. The other, the district officers or the colonial officers. So more of the activity was then, remember West Africa was regarded as the white man's grave because of malaria and because of yellow fever. And so when they were coming in, they were doing all the efforts to make sure that they protected their people from these diseases, which didn't seem to touch the natives, as they called us then, but was killing quite a lot of the expatriate people who were coming in So the focus of medical research at that time was not really to do research about this. What are the two things causing the major problems? This was malaria and this was yellow fever. So they focused only on those ones, particularly as if you had yellow fever, if you had malaria, then commerce was not working well. The people could not get the products to the colonial side. So to protect the trade, you wanted to protect the people. You're not protecting the people for the people's sake, but you're protecting them because of the trade. Because if you got sick, then of course that means there'll be no trade. So the British government that came in, they were mainly focusing on just yellow fever and malaria, as distinct from what. But then in 1925, the Rockefeller team arrived. They actually had wanted to come in much earlier because they started working on yellow fever in the Americas. And they were almost coming to the end of it, but there was this thought was, where did yellow fever originate? And the Rockefeller group wanted to find out something about that. And of course, Africa was the place to come in and check that. They came in 1925 and stayed for just about 10 years. But they did great things, during that time. That was the first time anybody was able to show experimental transmission of yellow fever to an animal. And that became the study that Max Taylor came to do in New York, became the foundation for the yellow fever vaccine, which we're using today. So the great work was done in those places at that time. Then they came back in 1964, that was about 30 years later. This time to expand the scope of the activities, not just focusing on yellow fever, but on all, as many of the arboviruses, and introduce different techniques, different things. And that was, to me, more like the birth of One Health. But the team of the Rockefeller that came included virtually every professional. We had entomologists on the list, we had mammalogists we had on the list, we had medical doctors, we had veterinarians, and we had, basic scientists. And they all went out into the field whenever there was an epidemic or to study anything. The entire team went together. You focus on your own area. At the end of the day, we met together and we discussed on several occasions. Like there's some centers in Nigeria called the Nupeko Forest, which had what you expect for transmission of diseases. The monkeys were there, the human beings were living next door, and there was the mosquito vectors, which are also around. So everybody went in, did your own bit, and came up with. And so a lot of the new viruses, again, the same thing they did in Brazil. A lot of the viruses we talk about now today were actually discovered during those periods. Introduced new things like mounting sentinel mice up at different levels of a tree because of the different populations of mosquitoes that go there. That's how people in Uganda found out the Zika virus, which is the name of a forest that is there. So in 1964, they came back to Ibadan and signed an agreement with the Nigerian government for about 10 years to study arboviruses. And as I said, this was to me one of the first area of One Health. So all of the budgets and the political activities of the British, I'm going back to the British now because we started a story from there. Everything was actually controlled from outside the country. And whatever they wanted to do had a political implication behind it. So it doesn't really pure science study. It was study based on an objective, which was a political objective to keep the country safe and to keep the workers who were coming in there safe. As I said, the West Africa was regarded as a white man's grave because of malaria and because of yellow fever. Now, health and medical research focused on this objective to protect our workers. And government health services were actually more focused on combating epidemics rather than treating some of the disease. You will see in the next few slides that come in the kind of budgets that they had at that time in dealing with research activities. So they focused more on agriculture also at that time because the products then, those are the years when palm oil was very popular to make margarine and other things. And the source of those things were coming from those areas. So they protected the workers, because you can get some of these experts. They also focused on the veterinary aspect, in which there was a lot of exportation of animals in the place. And in fact, the veterinary vaccine establishment in Nigeria, which was set up in 1924, is still going strong, because there was so much funding to it, compared to the human side, where they set up a human vaccines section in 1954 thereabouts. By 1984, it had collapsed because emphasis was more on the commercial side of whatever it is that was going on there. We haven't changed that much in Nigeria, because you must have been hearing that we're having problems between the Fulani cattlemen and the human beings, and depends on which side you are. You place your emphasis on what suits you more. So research, when the British were, their own kind of research was also followed in the colony, whatever it is that they were doing in Britain. So between the First World War, everything stopped down because there was war, and research activities, scientific activities stopped. But it was resumed again on the at the end of the war. And the British Research Council, actually they had the Medical Research Council, and then the Agricultural Research Council, one for the human being and one for the animals. State funds were provided, but for the not at the country level, but in Britain for this kind of activities. That map or whatever shows over a period of time what funding. They put a lot of money on trypanosomiasis that were killing all the animals. Viruses of human beings were much less. Every other thing that affects human beings, like filariasis, leprosy, scurf blood, these are diseases which were common among the local people. And it received quite a rich amount of funding. But for cattle trypanosomiasis, so a lot of funding provided, again, for commercial reasons rather than for the research that was going on. So the colonial group carried out yellow fever studies in Yaba at that time. And they took over, I just say in 1934, the Rockefeller had come in 25 and left in 1934. So between 1945, after the World War, and the British colonial took over the activities of the Rockefeller Foundation, which was based in Yaba at that time. Unfortunately, they still focused only on yellow fever, not on arboviruses. In fact, the only two viruses which were ever isolated by that group, which was neutral, was the Lagos bad virus, which is a rhabdovirus, and a second one which we call Elisha virus, which is of the Buyamwera virus, the symbol group of viruses. Not much was done about arboviruses at that time. Again, until, sorry, those pictures are not showing very well. Okay, there. Until the Rockefeller came back. If you come to the Yaba, you still find one of these buildings still standing. This was the building of the lab that the Rockefeller built in Yaba in 1924, 25 when they came in. And the animal houses, the other labs were actually same. Actually, these were prefabricated structures that were brought in from the US to establish. And you notice that they all put on stilts to make sure that ants don't eat up the lab work. But that was the kind of structures they had. Many of you, I'm not sure many of you young ones have seen what we call lyophilization. You can see they were lyophilizing yellow fever vaccines at that time. Much better techniques are being used now. But they produced good vaccines, which were found to be of this thing. So I'm going to do a quick summary of some of the work of the Rockefeller Foundation and the viruses which were first discovered by the group in Africa. And you probably will see many viruses which are in there. Between the 1900s, in the decade of nitrogen, blue tongue virus was actually first found in South Africa. The British government was still there in South Africa at that time, and it was the work of the South African group. The next one was the African swine fever and Nairobi sheep disease, again found in South Africa. Of course, the Rockefeller's major function was on yellow fever, which was discovered in Nigeria, although the sample that yielded the vaccine, the virus, was actually from a Ghanaian individual called Asibi, who got sick in Accra. But the samples were tested in both Lagos and in Yaba. Other viruses that came in, which later on did not really cause much problem in Africa. West Nile, of course, you know what West Nile is doing now. It was first discovered in Uganda. Rift Valley fever, African horse sickness, and Bamba. These are some of these viruses that came new into the world. Between 1940 and 1949, we had 3 viruses which came up. Uganda S, Cephalic forest, and Zika, which all of us are aware of what that is now becoming. I did mention that the British group looked at Elisha and Lagos bats before the labs in South Africa found all these other viruses. They are not causing any problem yet, just as at one time West Nile was not causing any problem. No, Zika wasn't causing any problem. I would not be surprised if one day we wake up and we have an outbreak of Nguavuma. Even to pronounce it may be a problem, but it may still cause a problem. Then now chikungunya. I mean, of course, so you can see that these are viruses which have been lying dormant in Africa: West Nile, Zika, chikungunya, and these other ones which have been there. In 1960 to 1969 was when the group in Ibadan worked on the outbreak of Lassa fever in 1969 and found dengue both in Nigeria, and it was Rockefeller Foundation group that actually demonstrated the presence of the dengue in West Africa for the first time. Lassa, I'll be talking more about Lassa later because that has remained a major problem. What I did here was to look at the viruses which are been isolated in Africa and in different countries where they're done. When you see Cameroon, Central African Republic, Senegal, Seychelles, and Zaire, you probably know that those are the Institute Pasteur group. And when you see Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda, that would be the Rockefeller group. So there were 2 major groups. They were working in different parts of Africa and coming up with the different viruses in the different periods of the year. Sorry, these figures are not clear. But a total of 113 new viruses were actually discovered in these countries of Africa over a period of about 50 years. I gave a few copies. So I'm looking at now, focusing on the situation in Nigeria. And the first time we actually isolated some of these viruses way back in 1940, this was the veterinary group that carried out these studies. They found blue tongue virus, which was originally a virus of South Africa, not of Nigeria. And then, as I mentioned, Lagos bat, a rabies-related virus found among bats in Malaysia as a Ebola virus found in the human beings. Rift Valley fever came up in 1959 from sheep in the northern parts of the country. A series of 4, 5, 6 viruses, which actually have mainly Nigerian names, Sango, Shamunda, Sabo, Shuni, were discovered in and around Ibadan amongst the cattle population and goat population at that time. Mokola virus is a rabies-related virus. It was found among shoes. And then we did find Wessel's-Brown virus, which was of the group B virus, like yellow fever, which was originally isolated from South Africa. 1969 was the year of Lassa fever, which belongs to the academy. Sorry, the spelling is upside down there. Congo Kimera uraric fever. Bovine ephemeral fever is a veterinary cattle disease. West Nile, of course, we found it first in 1973 in Nigeria. And the first time we got blue tongue in culicoides in the country, and that became a this thing. I led the gaps 72, 94, 2004 because there's a lot of story behind that. The Rockefeller left Nigeria in 1972 after about 10 years. The idea was that gradually the country would take over. But as you find in many of the foreign aid agreements, the countries never really bring up their own side. And therefore, a lot of things that are set up that functioned very well during that period gradually declined. And so in 1972, the Rockefeller left. And then we tagged on. Really, nothing much was happening. If you look at the way the viruses have been isolated, you find We didn't actually make any other virus isolation until way back in 2015. And what the cause was this, you won't believe what happened. There was, we had an election in 1993, which was disputed by everybody. And the following year, the anniversary of the dispute, we had 10 days of which nobody went to work. And by the time we came back to the lab, everything we had in the lab was gone. Loads and graveyard of refcos containing not only these viruses, but even new ones that at that time had not even been classified. We all got destroyed. And the lab never actually recovered after that because funding was not there. And you find, and of course, situations in the country also deteriorated in terms of infrastructures like electricity and water. And so, virus activities kind of stopped, got stalled because of those political issues. By 2004, the lab died completely. But then other activities came up. The polio group, because there was polio eradication initiative was going on. What used to be our insectary was then reconverted into a polio lab. And then the US government PEPFAR activities also brought in HIV studies. So the lab that was dealing with all of the arboviruses ended up now focusing just on polio and on PEPFAR, so no other things. A group of young veterinarians who started this year began working. And so after a lapse of almost 40 years, activities then began in those other places where they're isolating these viruses from culture. I put in there some viruses which had gone up to the level of some recognition, but then no further action could be taken because of the destruction that occurred. And they actually got names and were supposed to begin to try to classify them. Potiskum virus, Jos, Dubé, Ebola, these are all. But there were 15 other viruses which at that time we didn't even know what they were, but we knew they were viruses. But what family it became, we didn't know where they came from. And unfortunately, there's no way we can ever go back to find those ones. That's the great thing that is lost to what is happening. However, things are changing. We're moving away from the old things, and everybody's now using genomic analysis for activities. There was a World Bank funding that started this African Center for African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases. In those days that we used to end up with inoculating tubes for this, and now they're doing genomic analysis of Lassa virus right on the moment. And I think there's been an improvement. One of the good things they did the last yellow fever epidemic we had, within a matter of 2-3 days, we had found out that this not only was this yellow fever, but we also were able to trace by the study that it originated not from Nigeria, but from another country. And so the world is moving, and we're kind of moving with it. But then, for those of us who have been with the field of arbovirology, it's like there's a lot of regret that those good days of working together, of everybody putting all their resources to decipher, sitting down doing genomic analysis doesn't really tell you what is going on in the field, who is transmitting it, what's the social aspect of it. And we found that during the Ebola outbreak, the solution to Ebola was not actually what they did in the medical field, but it was only when people focused on the social issues and the political aspect of it that the Ebola epidemic that raged for 2 years was reached a point of abatement. There's a story which we always like to tell about how, with these modern techniques and bringing everybody together, bringing your resources together. At a time, if you remember, there was a time when, I think it was in Liberia, where the people actually ransacked an Ebola treatment center because people would go in on Friday and they bring them out on Saturday or Sunday dead. So the story was that it was the hospital that was killing the people and not the Ebola. And the only way you could do that was to go to the IT people. You won't believe that this is the one that solved that problem. It was the IT people that then put in what you call the CC camera into the world and put a television set outside. so that the people can watch what is going on there. It was only then they believed that the doctors were not killing their people. And so we're bringing, nowadays I think things are moving and they're changing. And everybody can become of use when we're talking about health rather than medicine, or which is what we're talking about. I'm focusing on Lassa fever because it's 50 years this year that we first described Lassa fever. That was 1969, somewhere there. The map, it's not too clear, but what you see, we have 36 states in the country. The first time was in 2 states, and you can see over a period of time, Lassa fever spread virtually throughout the entire country, so that now we're having more than 20, 30 of our states reporting Lassa fever. Initially, we thought disease surveillance was improving, but I think it was more than that. The awareness was also being. We discovered, some of the studies were, again, genomic analysis sorted that out for us, that the larger population, there was this prevalence and large population of rodents, the Mastomys natalensis that are responsible as the Nigeria host, became virtually invaded the country, multiplied so rapidly. They were matching us man for rodents. We have a population of 200 million. So I believe we have more than 200 million rodents in the country. But what then happened was that over the years, we're now having more states reporting Lassa fever. And again, last year we thought was the largest number. We had about 3,400 cases, of which we were only able to confirm laboratory with 600 cases. The question that people begin to ask, if those cases, the other 2,400, had the similar thing, well then what are they getting? So these are gaps in our laboratory activities. You set up a laboratory that can really diagnose Lassa fever. And then so you have 3,000 samples, it picks up 600 of them, and there are 2,400 remaining. We don't know what they are. Are they Lassa fever? Is it something else? Again, these are some of the areas where laboratory system need to be looked into and improved. This year, unfortunately, the number of cases, suspected cases we have, is actually even higher than last year's number. And I did it again. I did it. I confess. Now, what did you do to stop it up? Sorry. I will stay away from that place. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this fine enough? Okay. So, so we have this large number of suspected cases. Yes, the surveillance is improving, awareness is improving, but we need to match that with confirming to the people that of the 3,000 cases which you said are Lassa fever, and you're only able to confirm 600, you should be able to give answer to the people. What about the remaining 2,400? I think these are where we need to come in as improving the techniques, how you can come in on your own side. You have better techniques in diagnosis, how we can bring that on in to improve whatever is going on, so that you'll be able to provide better service to our people. I'll just quickly talk about this one. Everybody had forgotten about smallpox, and then monkeypox came to us in 2017, and it's still going on. At the last count, we had 787 cases, and 15 of them died, whether from the monkeypox or something. But it's been going on since 2017, and we're still reporting cases of monkeypox in the country. I mentioned yellow fever, which has been with us since the 20s when the colonial people came in. We have actually had one case raging on. And interestingly, this one, most of the people went to a games reserve and came back with yellow fever. And this would be a great opportunity of what we're doing in those days, where everybody comes in, the veterinarian, the entomologist, the physician, all coming to work together. Unfortunately, what is happening now, the study that was done was limited in scope. But I think it gave us a great opportunity to look back on those experiences of the past, where everybody played his role to find out. We don't really know which of the animals within the zoo, the game reserve, from where they got the yellow fever from. But these are studies that they're going on. Polio, the world seems to have forgotten about polio. On the 26th of August this year, Nigeria was for 3 years without any case of wild polio. And hopefully, if we don't get any more, we'll be declared free of polio next year. And as being the last country in Africa that is declaring, the entire African region will be declared free of polio. However, we must remember that when we say Nigeria has not reported polio, it is only in the areas where we have access to. There are certain parts of the country, because of the insurgency, we've not been able to reach, so we don't really know what is going on there. So, so far, we hope that nothing is going on there. But I believe something is going on, and we need to look into that. I cannot finish without mentioning about Ebola. Everybody praised Nigeria for 2014 when it happened. But for those of us who were at home, we knew that it was more than our talent. At the time this case came into Nigeria, the entire health system was on strike. Hospitals were closed, the government hospitals and every other thing. And so this case could really go to a private clinic. We limited, hopefully, the contact could have happened if it had gone into an open outpatient hospital, one of the largest in the place there. But then when we knew it was Ebola, more out of fear of death than the ability to control, the government came out and did what needs to be done. But then I don't think we're able to institutionalize that one, because soon after, all of the cases I'm reporting today, the Ebolas, the yellow fever, the monkeypox are coming on, and I've been raging for 3 or 4 years. So sustaining the Ebola success requires more than just an action, that needs to be a continuous activity involving everybody. And going back to the One Health thing, everybody who has any role to play in health should come together to ensure that this, which then means that here you take good governance for granted. Back home, it's a major problem. And so politics and poor governance becomes the foundation for some of the problems we're seeing. I showed a slide 2 days ago at a meeting. We're supposed to be talking about current epidemics, current outbreaks, or whatever it is. And I had a picture of the WHO releases every week situation of epidemics in Africa. Exactly week 45, 5 years ago, week 45, 2 years ago, and we preferred now. When we put the pictures together, there was no change. The same number of epidemics, the same kind of processes were still going on. So if 5 years ago we're still having the same type of epidemics and nothing seemed to have changed, the underlying problem has not changed. The politics, the poor governance. And when we're talking about global health security, I think we need to think a little bit more that the solution to global health security is not going to come from solving the problem in Washington. The problem is going to be where the problem is for the national health security in that place. Because if you nip that outbreak in the bud before it becomes a major thing, then you won't have to worry about global thing. But what we are finding today is that there is this, what we call global preparedness. Stockpile that, stockpile this. 1/100th of the funds that you're using in stockpiling, if it's used in putting good surveillance in the country where diseases are occurring, you won't need any stockpiling. Now, these are some of the issues I think at international discussions like this, we need to come together and with what we think will be the solution. Because if what happened 5, 10, 20 years ago in many of the other countries are still happening, the Ebola that started in DR Congo, this is not their first time. This is their 10th Ebola outbreak. Fortunately, this particular one was compounded by insurgency and the war that is going on in the place there. And so, peace in one part of the world becomes an issue for you and I, wherever you are. Because if you have your peace here, and so long as people like me can still come here, we can import the non-peace to your place. Thank you very much. None.
Here's one here. Go ahead.
Yes, Professor Tomori, you had a lab in the University of Ibadan in 1970. I think I came to your lab in 1970.
Please sit down. I still have the love.
So it is a joy to have you here today, and I saw your name and going to this topic.
Thank
But you
you.
had a lab at the University of Ibadan, virus recycling lab.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. And my uncle was one of your grad students, so I came with him to your lab. Yes.
I'm not that old.
No, you are not that. So, but I want to know where is that lab? What is the state of that lab? Because that, apparently you went to become the vice chancellor at another university. But that lab was the premier lab in the country at that time. It was known, not only in Nigeria, but in Africa and worldwide. But where is the lab today?
You almost want to make me cry. Yeah, it's the day we buried everything there, I actually cried because we lost everything. Eventually, it became converted to other things. So that was when I was saying one wing became a polio lab, and the other wing is what is being used for HIV testing. But the sad part of it is that each of those are funded from outside the country. Without the external funding, the lab will have, the building probably may not even be standing. Again, these are some of the issues. It's good to have aid, but was it not the Bible that said that the one who gives benefits more than the one who receives? And it's always like that. You know, many of our countries accept all these, whatever assistance we get, but we're not better off for it. In a way, it's whether you like it or not, it benefits the one who is giving you aid. Let me give you one good example, and let's be frank with each other. So I get a USAID grant, which is given first to CDC to run, because back home there's corruption, and they're not sure that I will spend the money well. So the money is given to CDC. So CDC establishes an African center to monitor my problem in Atlanta. I don't have money to establish this in my country. So 1/10 of the money, first of all, goes to set up something in CDC. If you're going to give me a vehicle, you're not going to buy a vehicle from my country. You're going to buy it from here. And if you're going to set up a new thing, just like Rockefeller came with the prepared this, and you bring all those things in there. Whether we like it or not, quite a lot of that money goes back in one form or the other to who gives you the aid. And it's not as if you don't have the money. Every week, the EFCC in Nigeria, which is the body that looks at corruption or something, puts out notices of how much they have recovered of countries' money that was stolen by somebody, or some of those other people. Then you take that number side by side with the aid we're getting. What we've recovered is at least 10 times more than the aid we have gotten. So why are we asking for aid when 10 times of that money has been stolen by our people? I shouldn't be saying this here, but but it's important for also you to understand that there are some of the issues that you cannot continue to bring aid into a country where there is underlying corruption. Your aid money gets sucked into that vortex of corruption, whether you like it or not. 1/4 of it, half of it goes into corruption. Remember the Ebola situation in Sierra Leone and Liberia. The World Bank and others ended up finding that close to 10, 20, 30% of the money that should go in ended up in other people's pockets. So I don't want to talk about Ukraine, but it's all over.
You made an allusion to once upon a time, well, there's this interdisciplinary meetings working together to figure out these different outbreaks. What happened that was different then? Can that be replicated we don't have, didn't sound like there was as much of that entomologist, veterinarian position together. What changed and how did you bring that back?
First of all, let me talk about home. First of all, it was like the in those days there was well, of course, it was aid money that came in, and they came up with all that ideas, and it worked well. I mean, because the fund was available for everybody. Back home, where your country does not provide fund for anything, for even a simple thing, it's difficult to work together. Because first, the money is small enough. It's that small that you don't want to share that with anybody because it's not going to solve your problem. So everybody works his own, looks for his own money and works separately. And this was what I said. I regretted that the outbreak that occurred in the games reserve in Nigeria was not seized as an opportunity for a One Health approach, because games reserve, the first thing you think of the veterinarians, the forest guards, forest keepers or whatever, and the entomologists who knows you should come in there. But we then send just epidemiologists there. You're not going to solve that problem. I think individual rivalry could be one of the causes. I was at College Station just 2 days ago, and they have this group that works with, there's a Bush School of Politics, and there's Snowcroft, something, whatever, plus the veterinary school in Texas, Tamo, and the medical school. And all this was discussion. How do we get to the politicians to get bills made out that will be used for research? And so that was the kind of group. And I actually told them that it's good you're doing this here, but it's like, the place where we really need it is back home there, because I should be able to talk to my politicians about what is going on. How can we get more funding? But then you go to the minister, the guy in charge of budget, and the question he's going to ask you is, health is not a revenue yielding project, so I'm not going to give you money. But we always remind them that disease is a revenue destroying something. So if you don't put it there, you lose all your revenue which you have collected. This kind of message can only be coming when we all sit down together. It will require for each of us to share our pride and work together, because there's a role for everybody, and to appreciate that my role is as good as your role. And without my role, there's no way you can make better progress. If you work together, we're going to make better progress. I guess it's like saying this is a body, there's the hand, there's the eye. I can decide to close my eyes and think I'm okay. I'm probably going to collide with the chair or something. So these are things that we need to work together. It takes each of us to appreciate, first of all, to have confidence that my role is important and yours is important. And one of the problems that we have with aid in Africa is the fact that money is the only thing we think is important. But then the question is, if you have the money and I'm not there to help you spend it properly, your money is of no use to anybody. Therefore, there's a role for the man who is at home, who is on the ground. And until we begin to appreciate each of those roles, we cannot have this one health concept we're talking about. And I used to remember those days when we used to go to the forest in Beko Forest, and we had these entomologists. Everybody, the entomologist works only at night. Those of us who are collecting birds and animals, we wake up in the morning ahead of everybody. But at the end of the day, you brought your own result together, because you have your own different role. I can't catch mosquitoes the way they're catching it. I probably crush all of them. He doesn't know how to handle animals like I know how to do. I'm not a physician, so I can't treat human beings, and yet there are human cases in that same environment. We're all exchanging, mosquitoes are biting and shedding one thing from one animal to another, and unless we bring that together. So I think it's a thing that we need to all look back again. To me, I think the best years of arbovirology in either in Brazil, Nigeria, Cali, all those was those days when everybody went together and worked together. And it wasn't as if I'm better than you or you're better than me, because you had a role to play and you played your role, which which was as equally as important, is literally on each of those, for those who like to publish papers, on each time we went out on the field, we came out with 5, 6 papers. Because the entomologist writes his own, I write my own as a vet, the physician writes his own, the mammalogist writes his own, and so you have these paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. I don't think they do that nowadays, because you're all genomic and engineering, so it's not possible to do that. Yes?
What research projects are currently active on lots of people in Nigeria now?
There is the CEPI. We're actually looking at the vaccine because it doesn't look like we'll probably ever see the end of Lassa if we don't improve our sanitation. So CEPI is working with a group of people. They're actually going to start the first trial for the Lassa vaccine. I don't know too much about that, but I was aware that CEPI was working on that. They gave a grant to a group, and the vaccine is ready for the first field trial. So that's the main thing that is going on. Again, I think the issue I mentioned about the lab, we need to improve on our lab diagnosis. There's no way you can be reporting every year that 3,000 cases, suspected cases, only 300 were confirmed. We need to do much better than that. So what is responsible for the remaining 2,400? We need to move a step further than just say, oh, we confirm only 300 or something like that.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tomori, for your
UTMB Health, working together to work wonders.